Happy New Year, everybody! Happy New Year! Yeah, a late start to the Elevenses. So it should have been last week and wasn't, but there we go. I hope you all had a lovely time, and hope you had a great. Well, no, I've spoken to you since Christmas, haven't I? Oh, I can't remember when we last spoke. Oh yeah, we didn't really speak. I was prancing around the kitchen, wasn't I, doing quick changes. I really enjoyed that. I did. Instead of the normal Elevenses. But anyway, we're back to the normal format, and I'm going to get going. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get going with the thing that I did prepare for last week. And so I'm going to love you all, but turn off the comments. There we go, turn off commenting. And I'm going to show you this first image, which I put up on my stories, which, yeah, okay, your imagination could run wild, couldn't it, on this one? And indeed, it may well have done. This is by a French artist called Nicolas Poussin. It dates from the 1630s, and of course, it is all explained. It is all explained from the fact that it is, in fact, Greek mythology. Of course it is. Anything weird going on in an image, it is 9 times out of 10 Greek mythology in older images. So this is, in fact, the story of Zeus's childhood. So we've done Zeus quite a lot from the point of view of how he his mother Rhea kept giving birth, and his father Kronos kept taking the children and eating them until we got to the point where she gave birth to Zeus, and Zeus was exchanged for a rock, and he had the rock instead. And we know that Zeus survived because we know that when he was big enough and strong enough, he went back and confronted Kronos. But what we've never really discussed, what we've never discussed at all, is how Zeus managed to survive and who looked after him. Well, this is your answer. So Zeus was taken away. He was taken away to live on Crete, so there's a bit of dispute. And he was looked after, obviously not by his mum, Rhea, because she was busy doing other things. But that was instructive, wasn't it? She was busy doing other things rather than looking after her last-born child. Anyway, it couldn't be Rhea. So it was a couple of nymphs and a third nymph called Amalthea, who owned a goat, or possibly Amalthea was the goat itself. So that is what you can see here. So Zeus was raised by these nymphs, and here you can see he's suckling on this goat, Amalthea, who possibly brought him up. And so he's nourished. So the nymphs did really well. Actually, they did really well indeed. They looked after him. They nourished him. They also really cleverly would hang him from a branch of a tree. That's really descriptive. Yeah, they just drape him over this branch. No, they would hang him in a cradle over the branch of a tree, but off the ground. So that because then he was sort of like in a sort of no man's land in many respects. So it meant that the gods of the earth and the gods of the sky wouldn't know where he was. He was kind of disguised in plain sight because he wasn't on the earth and he wasn't in the sky. So clever. And they would also bang drums and be really, really loud and noisy and sing and dance whenever he was crying or making noises, so they could disguise his presence in that way as well. And he thrived. He loved this goat, whether this was Amalthea who he suckled from, or whether Amalthea was the owner of the goat. Differences of opinion there, but he loved the goat, and so much so that he spent a lot of time with the goat, but this meant that one day he was either suckling or playing with the goat, and growing big and strong, and he by accident one day broke off the goat's horn, which is where we get the term the horn of plenty, because what happened was that he broke off the goat's horn, felt really, really bad, he wasn't meaning to, it was just hijinks, like whoops, oh got a goat's horn in my hand. Could happen to any baby, couldn't it? And so instead of just sort of throwing it away, he decreed that this horn would be filled up would become the horn of abundance. It would be filled up with everything that a person would need to sustain them in terms of nourishment, for whoever had it. And so that is the origin, or one of the origins, of the horn of abundance. There's the corn, the horn, eucopia of plenty, of muchness. So they looked after this baby really well, but I want to point out the fact that they didn't look after him so well as to not, in this image, put him by a tree that actually has a beehive in it. This is a really beautiful passage of this painting, actually. So this nymph is pouring honey. I've got a closer image. I don't know whether you can see that, but the honey is like sort of pouring from the tree. She's got a leaf in her hand, and the honey is pouring from the tree. And then to the right of the tree, you can see the sort of little bits in the sky, and those are bees. So really cute. Yeah, so they weren't worried about him being stung. But there's another reason for the bees in this painting, as well as said it was by Poussin in the 1630s, and Poussin was French, but lived and worked for most of his career in Italy, in Rome. And the Pope, it was Urbino the 7th or 8th, I think the 8th, Urbino the 8th was a Barberini, and the Barberini family had bees on their coat of arms as one of their emblems. And so this is very much Poussin sucking up to the Barberini Pope with this reference to bees in this painting. So that is that's the origin of that's how Zeus grew up. There's another couple of images. This is one by Vasari, which is kind of really quite disturbing, isn't it? So Vasari, great writer. Vasari wrote almost like the first biography of artists in the 1550s. This is about 1556. It's in the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. A close up of this bit. This is properly, makes me feel slightly queasy, this one, I've got to tell you. So this is Zeus suckling here. There's another version of the story, like I said, where his Amalthea wasn't actually a goat, but a nymph who owned a goat. So here we go. So here she's milking the goat to feed Zeus. The bit that I like best out in this image, it's like, what's he holding up? I feel like it's a sort of condiment pot, it's like a pepper pot or something. It's like, yeah, okay, so this milk is fine, Mum, but or Amalthea, but could you maybe season it a little bit? Here you go, have this, a little grind of salt or pepper, or maybe a little bit of both would make it quite a bit nicer. I have no idea what that is in that image. I had no idea at all, but it amuses me. So this is Jacob Jordan's, so again, 1630s, kind of makes me giggle. Okay, so Zeus grows up and he's suckled by this goat, and he lives to manhood. And then he goes and confronts Kronos. Now, what we also haven't really addressed is the fact that when he confronts Kronos, it's not like, Kronos, you did wrong. I think that I should become the head of the gods now, and you can kind of relinquish your position. No, obviously there was a big old fight. It wasn't just a big old fight. It was a war. It was a war between the new gods, the Olympians, led by Zeus, and the old gods, the Titans. And this kind of conflict between Kronos and Zeus was a key element in the war between the Olympians and the Titans, the Titanomachy. That's a word that Titanomachy, yes, that's right. I nearly was, I don't know, Titanomachy, I don't know how I say it in my head, but it's not right. Anyway, Titanomachy. And so there's a big fight. And what does Zeus do in this fight? Well, he takes the skin from this goat, Amalthea. Now, let's think about that. He takes the skin from the goat, Amalthea. I'm going to say that by this time, Zeus has grown up, and so the goat is quite old and dies a natural death. And then to honour her, Zeus skins her and takes her hide and uses it as a shield. Because the alternative is pretty horrible. Like, thanks very much for nourishing me. Thank you very much for giving us the horn of plenty. Thanks very much for all your care and attention. I'm coming at you with a knife and I'm going to skin you. Not so kind. So I'd like to think that she lived to a ripe old age, and then when she died, he honoured her by taking her hide and using it as a shield, a special shield, because of course he is a god, and so this was a shield that couldn't be penetrated by arrows. So sometimes it's depicted as an actual shield, sometimes it's depicted as an animal fur. Actually, rather I like this. This is not from a goat. It's not from any kind of animal. And so it was to protect Zeus. So okay, so that's one thing he did. But then the other thing that he did, which actually finally, after about 10 minutes, brings me to kind of the whole point of this Elevenses. He also then threw Amalthea, the goat, into the air, and she became a constellation. So this is where we get Capricorn. So that's what I'm on about. So yes, I think we are in the sign of Capricorn still. To be on the palette is a Capricorn. And so this is where, well, this is one of the stories of the Capricorn, but you will notice that Capricorn isn't just a goat. Oh no, it gets a bit more complicated because Capricorn, look, it's like half fish, half goat. Weird. So the story continues. So that's one of the ways that potentially, so it could be Amalthea that was thrown into the sky. There's another story that purports to be the origins of the star sign Capricorn, or of the constellation, and that is that this war between the Olympians and the Titans, really went on, and Zeus was, as I said, at the heart of it, and of course he eventually won. But there is a particularly nasty battle that is spoken about in Greek mythology between Zeus and the giant Typhus. The Titans, the giant Typhus, and for whatever reason, they get into one-on-one combat, Zeus and this Typhus. And Typhus is a big, old, hefty, scary bugger. And he is stronger than Zeus, and he rips out Zeus's tendons in his hands and his feet. So that's not really going to do him any good when he's trying to fight. And he throws them and they land in a river. And this little fellow who has been sort of identified as a sort of Pan type character, and when I say Pan, so Pan is half man and half goat, but this is it's probably not the same thing. This is a sort of a full goat, Aegipan. It's called Aegipan. Not Frangipan, but Aegipan. And this little character realizes that Zeus probably isn't going to win this fight without his tendons, and so he is a goat and he jumps into this river and he gathers up, true story, gathers up Zeus's tendons and he gives them back to Zeus, and Zeus ends up winning the fight and they win the war. And of course then Zeus is able to reward Japan by making him immortal as a constellation. So that's another story about the origins of Capricorn. So here we are. This is a bas relief, and actually I'm not entirely sure where this is from. I can't remember. But this is possibly Japan as the half. I missed out a really crucial bit. So when he jumps into the river to save Zeus, essentially, he is aided presumably by other gods by turning half into a fish. So that's the other story. There's a final one. There's a final story about the possible origins of Capricorn. Very similar little character, but this is identified not as Japan, but as Pricus. And the final legend about the origins of Capricorn concerns Pricus. This is metal, I think bronze, and it was found metal detectoring. The metal detectorists found it in Somerset, so it's in the Museum of Taunton. It's really old. It's probably the 1st or 2nd century AD. Would have had horns. It's about 25 centimeters long, so it's not terribly big. Isn't it cute? He's absolutely, that's sort of like sense of movement. So he's like, all right. So sense of movement, important, because Pricus, great name, Pricus was an ancient immortal. He was created by Kronos, Zeus's father, and he lived in the sea. So he was originally a sea goat, looked like that, and he was sort of sentient. He could think and he could speak, and he had lots of little offspring, lots of little Pricuses, but it seems that he was a single father, and he loved them and he nurtured them, but he couldn't really control them terribly well, because every time they grew up, and I say every time they grew up, they would get curious. They would talk quite well, and they would get curious, and they would want to go to land. And when they went onto the land, the beach, and then when they went onto the land, basked in the sunlight for a while, they grew legs. They grew 4 legs, and worse than that, they lost their ability to think and to speak. And so that's the origin of goats, according to this. But this didn't help Pricus, because that meant that he kept losing his offspring, which he didn't like very much at all. And because he, at this point, actually presided over time, what he was able to do, time and again, was to then wind the clock back and start all over again with his offspring, but the same thing kept happening. And so eventually he realised that he wasn't going to win this battle, and he prayed to Kronos to kill him, put him out of his misery, because he was very sad and lonely. And Kronos didn't. Well, he sort of did, but the way he did that was to throw him into the air as a constellation. So that is the third way, of the third myth of the origin of Capricorn. So if you're Capricorn, you're a little. I was going to say you're a little Pricus. Yes, your origins could be Pricus, or they could be from one of 2 stories of Zeus. So this year I will go through and do the origins of all of the star signs, because they're quite interesting. At least I think they are, because I don't actually know all of them yet. Let's hope they are. Otherwise, there's going to be some months that are more interesting than others, right? Okay, so let's turn comments back on. And hi Sue. And let's turn images off. Yeah, sorry, I put this on last minute because I was a bit chilly. This was lying around like it does. So what do you think of that then? So which one do you think is the real one? Poor old Amalthea thrown into the sky by Zeus. Little A Japan who are all over Stephen Fry. Little A Japan who saved Zeus, or little Pricus. I don't know. I don't know which one I would come down on the side of. Which one do you think? The Pricus myth does keep coming up quite often. It just depends what you read. It depends what you want to believe, doesn't it? Really, in many respects. So yeah, I'm just waiting. Got to be Pricus. I think it's Pricus. I just feel really sad for him. Like time and again, he's got this lovely little offspring. Yes, I know, all the little Pricuses, and they're all like there, and then they all like climb up the beach, and then they turn into goats. Who knew? There we go. I will be back next week. I'm gonna be talking about one of my favourite subjects. Beds. We're doing beds next week. I was going to say what people do in them. Not so much that sleeping and beds and medieval bonkersness. And perhaps that's where the legends about mermaids not coming ashore originated. Yeah, that's true. Because they change. Yeah, that's true. Mermaids. You see, if the little Pricuses had met some lovely little mermaids, they might have been a bit more inclined to stay, wouldn't they, in the sea? But they're just too curious. See, curiosity. Gore. Will there be gore? Maybe not so much gore. Like a bit of strange stuff. I'll try and find one that's gory for you. Adrian. You're terrible. I'm going to wish you a very happy Thursday and a very lovely weekend. I've also just advertised my Valentine's tour, which it's going to be a lot of fun. So that is on the website, and that's on a post. So if you fancy a bit of Valentine's frivolity, then join me. It's going to be Saturday the 13th. Hello, Patatronique. We're just finishing up. So yeah, check that out, and I'll be back next week. And no more fake hangovers. Wasn't a hangover. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.